My name is Wren. I am 27 years old. And when the student loan servicer letter arrived on a Thursday in September, I learned that the $38,000 in debt I had been paying down for 5 years was money I should never have owed at all. I want to tell you what was in that letter. But first I want to tell you about the baby shower, because the shower is where the shape of things finally became visible, even though I did not know yet what I was seeing. 3 weeks before the letter, my sister Tamsin had her baby shower at my parents' house in Shaker Heights. My mother had decorated the back room with paper garlands and white balloon clusters and a banner that said "Welcome Little One" in gold lettering. 23 women were there. I drove up from Akron the night before and slept in my old bedroom and spent the morning helping my mother arrange plates of food and fill the punch bowl and iron the tablecloth in the dining room. My aunt, my mother's sister, arrived at 10:45 and kissed my cheek and said, "You are so good to help," which I understood was not a compliment but a category. The daughter who helps, as distinct from the daughter who is celebrated. Tamsin arrived at 11 and the room adjusted. She is 4 years older than me and has a quality of presence that fills a space without effort, not loudness, but a kind of centrality that rooms recognize and organize around. She was 8 months pregnant and genuinely beautiful, and I was glad for her, genuinely. Her husband Marcus had dropped her off and gone to get coffee with my father, and she came in through the back door, and the room rose for her, and I carried a tray of pastries to the table and arranged them in a fan. At noon my mother stood and raised her glass. She had been building to this moment all morning. I had watched her practice the timing of in the kitchen, the slight pause before she spoke, the way she waited for the room to settle. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about Tamsin and what a wonderful mother she was going to be. She talked about the baby, who is still unnamed. Then she said, "And as a family, we are so proud to announce a gift to help them get started. A family investment in what matters most." 23 women applauded. My aunt turned and patted my hand with a particular gentleness reserved for people who are adjacent to a celebration rather than inside it. My mother said the gift was $11,200, contributed across the family, and it would go toward nursery furnishings and the first year of childcare. She looked at Tamsin when she said it.
She did not look at me.
I said nothing. I carried the empty punch bowl to the kitchen. I stood at the sink for a moment. The window above the sink faced the backyard, and the September light was coming through the leaves at the angle it gets in early fall, amber and specific. I breathed. Then I went back to the room. Something in me went completely quiet. Not in the kitchen, I mean something that had been making a low sound for years, a frequency I had stopped being able to hear. It went quiet. I did not know yet what had caused it. I refilled the punch bowl and brought it back to the table and sat down next to my aunt and listened to my mother describe the nursery colors Tamsin had chosen, and I smiled at the right moments and ate a small piece of cake and drove back to Akron at 3:30. Before I tell you about the letter, I need to tell you about a few things that happened before the shower, because they are the context the shower requires. When I was 19 and in my first semester at Kent State, I applied for a work-study position at the university library. I got it. I worked 12 hours a week shelving books and staffing the reference desk, and I used that money for textbooks and groceries and the occasional bus fare home. I did this because my financial aid package included loans but not enough cash on hand for daily expenses, and because my parents had said, when I enrolled, that the college fund would come through but that they couldn't send additional living support until it did. I did not complain about this. I shelved books and made it work. The summer after my sophomore year, I came home and found that Tamsin and Marcus had gotten engaged. The engagement party was at my parents' house, and it was beautiful. My mother's particular gift at its full expression. 31 people, caterer, a tent in the backyard with string lights. I helped set up the chairs. I did not do this resentfully. I did it because that is what you do when your sister gets engaged and your parents are throwing the party and you're home for the summer, and there are chairs that need setting up. That fall, junior year, I asked my father directly about the college fund. He was in the living room watching a game, and I sat down across from him and said, "Dad, what happened to the college fund?" He muted the game. He said there had been some difficulties with the market, that the account had not performed the way he had hoped, and that I should finish the year with loans, and they would sort it out over the summer. His voice was level and explanatory, and I believed him because he had never given me a reason not to. I went back to school and took out another round of loans and finished my junior year with a 3.7 GPA and a senior thesis project on color theory in early childhood development that my professor said was one of the better ones she had supervised. That summer, the summer before my senior year, Tamsin and Marcus got married. The wedding cost, by the number my mother mentioned in a different context months later, over $43,000. My parents paid for it. I was a bridesmaid. My dress cost $280. I gave a toast. I did not connect these numbers to the college fund. I did not think. The wedding cost $43,000, and my father said the market was difficult, and those two things might be related. People compartmentalize. Families especially. You learn to hold things in separate rooms and not let them speak to each other. I have been a second-grade art teacher at Lincoln Elementary in Akron for 2 years. Before that, I spent a year as a substitute, and before that, I was a student at Kent State, where I graduated in May 2020 with a degree in art education and a federal loan balance of $38,142. I had been making payments since that November, adding a little extra when I could, watching the number move down by increments that required a spreadsheet to feel meaningful. I was not complaining about this. I had told myself and believed that this was simply the shape of my adult life. A lot of people graduate with loans. My parents had not had money for a college fund by the time I enrolled. Things happened. That is what I had told myself. For 5 years. My parents had told me, when I was 17, that they had set aside money for my college. My father said it at the kitchen table, directly, in August of my senior year of high school. "We have a college fund for you, Wren. It should cover most of the tuition if you go somewhere in-state." I had chosen Kent State partly because of that conversation. I had taken out loans my freshman year because the fund had not yet been applied, and my financial aid office said that was normal. Funds sometimes arrived mid-year. Sophomore year the same. Junior year, I asked my father directly about the fund, and he said there had been some complications, that the market had been difficult, and that I should continue with the loans for now. I graduated with $38,142 in debt and filed it under things that did not go as planned. This is a more common thing than it should be, and I do not want to overstate the suffering of it. I know people who graduated with more, and I know people who graduated with less, and I know people who did not graduate at all. What I want to tell you is the specific texture of carrying a debt you believe is simply your circumstance. I made my first payment in November 2020, 3 months after graduation, when the grace period ended. I set up autopay at $247 a month, the income-adjusted amount, and set a phone reminder for the 15th of every month just in case the autopay failed. Every month for 5 years, I watched $247 leave my account. I tracked it in a spreadsheet, a simple one, just date and amount paid and running total. By January 2023, I had paid down $8,900. By January 2024, $14,200. I remember both of these numbers because I checked the spreadsheet on New Year's Day each year as a private accounting of progress. I was proud of this progress. I thought it was mine. I told my father about the spreadsheet once, at Thanksgiving 2022. I said, "I track it, I like to see the number move." He said, "That's smart, Wren." He said, "You've always been responsible." He knew where the number had started. 3 weeks after the baby shower, on a Thursday morning in September, I was eating breakfast before my 7:15 shift when my phone buzzed with an automated message from my student loan servicer. The subject line said, "Action required, account adjustment notice." I opened it expecting a routine update. Instead, it said that an audit of my account had identified an overpayment reversal from 2018 that had not been properly processed, and that the servicer needed to speak with me before applying the adjustment. There was a callback number and a case number. I called at 7:50 from my car in the school parking lot. A woman named Barb Kinsley answered and identified herself as a loan account specialist. She said the audit had flagged a 2018 transaction in which a payment of $28,500 was initially applied to my account and then reversed within 48 hours. She said this was the second such flag in their system, and it had triggered an automatic review. She said she needed to confirm a few things and ask whether I was aware of the original 2018 transaction. I said I was not. She said, okay. She asked me to hold. When she came back, she said the original transaction in 2018 had come from an account at a savings institution in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and that the disbursement reference indicated it was designated as a college savings fund transfer. She said the reversal, 48 hours later, had been authorized by a form on file, a standard fund redirection form, and that the funds had been redirected to a different account. She said the form had two signatures, one she identified as my father's name, and one that had been entered in my name. I said, I did not sign anything in 2018. She said, I understand. I'm going to flag this account for review and transfer you to our escalation team. I sat in my car in the school parking lot for 14 minutes after the call ended. The September morning was bright and specific, the kind of Ohio fall day that has no weather to speak of, just clarity. I watched a parent walk a child to the front entrance and stop to fix the zipper on the child's jacket. I watched the child look up at the parent while the zipper was fixed. I thought about my first loan payment in November 2020, the $247 I had transferred from my checking account on a Wednesday evening sitting at my kitchen table, the particular feeling of beginning a debt I expected to take a decade to clear. After school, I did not go straight home. I drove to a park near my apartment and walked 2 laps around the path that circles the pond there. It is a small urban park with geese and a few benches and a playground on the eastern side, and on a Thursday afternoon in September it was mostly empty. I walked, and I thought about what Barb Kinsley had said. The form had 2 signatures, one in my name. I thought about my junior year, sitting across from my father in the living room, him muting the game, saying there had been complications with the market. I thought about how specific that was, complications with the market, and how I had heard it as an explanation and filed it and gone back to school and taken out more loans. And I thought about the fact that the market is not an entity that files a fund redirection form at a savings institution in Shaker Heights. The market does not sign things. I walked 2 laps. Then I drove home and made pasta and watched a television show and went to bed at 10. I am a person who does the next ordinary thing when I do not know yet what else to do. That has served me well, mostly. I need to go back to 2018 because that is where the actual event happened, even though I did not know it at the time. In September 2018, I was 22 years old and starting my junior year at Kent State. Tamsin had been married for 3 months. Her husband, whose name is also Marcus, a coincidence I have always found slightly disorienting, worked in commercial real estate and had been laid off in August, 2 months after their wedding. I learned this later, not at the time. At the time I knew only that Tamsin and Marcus had married and moved to a house in Columbus, and that my parents had seemed stressed in a way they did not explain. My father had a college savings account for me at a savings institution in Shaker Heights. This I knew, or believed I knew. He had opened it when I was 14. He had mentioned it at the kitchen table in August of my senior year. He had said most of the tuition if you go in-state, which I had understood to mean a significant sum. What I did not know was that in September 2018, when Tamsin's husband lost his job, my parents had filed a fund redirection form at the savings institution, redirecting the $28,500 balance of my college savings account to Tamsin and Marcus's joint account. My father signed the form as account holder. The second signature line, designated beneficiary authorization, had a signature that was not mine entered in my name. I was on campus in Kent, Ohio, 38 miles away, enrolled in studio art methods and secondary education theory, taking out my 3rd round of student loans. The fund I had been told was mine had been redirected to my sister 2 months after her wedding. Nobody told me. I spent the 3 days between the Barb Kinsley call and the Marcus Webb call doing what I always do when I have a problem I cannot yet solve. I went to work. I taught color mixing on Thursday and Friday. I supervised a class project on Friday afternoon where the kids made self-portraits using only 3 colors, and one boy named Dominic chose blue, orange, and white, and made something that looked genuinely like him. I told him so. He shrugged and added more blue. On Saturday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and pulled up every email I had ever received from my student loan servicer, going back to 2020. I looked for any reference to a 2018 transaction. There was none. Then I pulled up my financial aid records from Kent State, my original enrollment documents, my award letters from all 4 years. Each year showed a combination of federal subsidized loans, unsubsidized loans, and work-study eligibility. Year 1, $12,500 in loans. Year 2, $11,200. Year 3, $9,100. This was the year I asked my father about the fund, and he said wait. Year 4, $7,900. Total, $40,700, reduced over time by my work-study earnings and some overpayment credits, landing at the $38,142 final balance I had been paying down. I sat with those numbers for a long time. If the college fund, $28,500, had been applied as intended in my freshman or sophomore year, my loan balance would have been roughly $12,000. I would have spent 5 years paying down $12,000 instead of $38,000. I had paid $18,720 in payments across 5 years. If the fund had been applied, I would have finished paying completely in my 3rd year of teaching. Instead, I had 3 more years left when the servicer letter arrived. I wrote all of this down in a notebook. Not for evidence. I did not think about evidence yet. I wrote it down because I needed to see it in one place, on paper in my own handwriting, to know what was actually true. I called Marcus Webb on the Friday after the Barb Kinsley call. He was a financial aid attorney in Cleveland whose name I got from a colleague at my school whose husband had dealt with a loan dispute the previous year. His assistant put me through that same afternoon. I described what the servicer had told me. He said, "Do you have the case number they gave you?" I said yes. He said, "Send that to my office along with your loan account documentation, and I'll have my paralegal pull the servicer file." We scheduled a call for the following Wednesday. On Wednesday, Marcus Webb told me 3 things. First, a fund redirection form executed without the beneficiary's knowledge or signature, in a case where the beneficiary was a named designee on the account, was potentially actionable as financial misconduct, depending on the account structure. Second, the signature entered in my name on the beneficiary authorization line was subject to verification, and if it was not mine, the redirection had been executed fraudulently. Third, if the redirection was found fraudulent, I had grounds for a civil claim against the account holder, my father, for the redirected amount plus documented financial harm, which in this case was 5 years of loan payments on debt I should never have carried. He referred me to a forensic accountant named Jillian Cho in Cleveland who could trace the fund disbursement path and verify the signature. I sent Jillian Cho the servicer documents and my own handwriting samples. I sent 7 pages of curriculum planning notes from my school files, dated and signed. She returned her analysis in 11 days. Her conclusion was precise. The signature on the beneficiary authorization line was not consistent with my handwriting in any of the 7 authenticated samples. She identified 2 specific letter form discrepancies and noted that the signature appeared to have been written by someone who was working from a written model, a cursive approximation rather than a natural signature. Marcus Webb filed a civil complaint on my behalf in October. Before he filed, Marcus Webb asked me a question I had not expected. He said, "Is there any possibility your parents believed they had your authorization?" I said no. I was a 22-year-old college student in Kent, Ohio. I had never been presented with any documents related to the college savings account, never been asked to sign anything, never been told the account was being modified. He said, "And you never received any written communication from the savings institution about this account?" I said no. He said, "That's important." A legitimate fund redirection to a named beneficiary would have generated a notification letter to that beneficiary at their address of record. If you never received one, either it was never sent or it was sent to an address that was not yours. I said the account was opened when I was 14, and I had lived at my parents' house in Shaker Heights at the time. He said, "So any notification letter would have gone to your parents' address." He let that sit for a moment. Then he said, "Okay, let's file." Jillian Cho's report also included something Marcus had specifically requested, a disbursement path trace showing where the $28,500 had gone after the reversal from my loan account. The funds had been deposited into a joint savings account at a different institution, held by Dale and Leanne Okafor. From that account, Across a period of 11 months from October 2018 to September 2019, a series of transfers totaling $26,400 had been made to an account held by Tamsin and Marcus. The remaining $2,100 had stayed in my parents' account. Jillian Cho noted this in her report without comment. The numbers did the commenting. The complaint named my father as the account holder who had authorized the redirection and named both my parents as parties to the fraudulent signature. It sought restitution of $28,500 plus documented loan costs, 5 years of payments at an average of $312 per month, totaling $18,720 for a combined claim of $47,220. My mother called me on a Saturday afternoon in November, 4 days after my parents received the complaint. I was walking home from the grocery store, 2 blocks from my apartment, carrying a bag in each hand. She said, "Wren, I don't understand why you're doing this." She said, "We did what we had to do for the family." She said, "You were fine. You had loans like everyone else." I said, "I had loans because you took the money." She said, "It wasn't like that." I said, "I know you believe that, Mom." Then I kept walking. I did not stop moving. I turned the corner onto my street and walked the last block to my building and put my groceries down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment in the particular quiet of a Saturday apartment, which is different from any other quiet, and I thought about what she had said. You were fine. You had loans like everyone else. A promise made privately and broken quietly is still a broken promise. The silence around it does not make it smaller. In December, while the settlement was still being negotiated, my aunt, my mother's sister, the one who had patted my hand at the shower, called me. She said she had heard there was some kind of dispute. She said she hoped I understood that the family had been under a lot of strain in 2018. She said Marcus had lost his job and Tamsin had been struggling and my parents had done what they could. She said, "You've always been the strong one, Wren. You've always managed." I said, "I managed because I had loans." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she hoped I would think about what I was doing to the family. I said, "I appreciate you calling, Aunt Deborah." Then I ended the call and stood in my apartment and looked out the window at the street below and thought about what it means to be called the strong one, how it functions as both a compliment and an alibi, a reason not to help, dressed up as a tribute to the person who didn't get help. I thought about how many times I had been told, in various forms, that I was fine, that I managed, that I didn't need what other people needed. And I thought about how much of my life I had spent being fine, managing, not needing, and how all of that had felt, right up until the moment I read the servicer letter, like a choice I was making. It was not a choice I was making. It was a condition that had been arranged for me without my knowledge. My parents' attorney contacted Marcus Webb in January with a settlement proposal. They would repay $28,500, the original fund amount, and acknowledge the redirection in a signed statement. They would not acknowledge the signature issue, framing it instead as a procedural error. Marcus advised me that accepting the settlement meant closing the civil claim and that the additional $18,720 in documented loan costs would not be recovered. He said the alternative was proceeding to court, which would likely take 12 to 18 months. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I had been paying $312 a month for 5 years on debt that should not have existed. I was 27 years old. I accepted the settlement. The restitution check arrived in February, drawn on my parents' joint account. It was for $28,500 exactly. There was no note. I deposited it the same week that Tamsin's baby shower thank you note arrived in the mail, a card with a small illustration of a rubber duck and a handwritten line from Tamsin that said, "We are so grateful for your help that day." I stood at my mailbox with the thank you note in one hand and thought about what help means, how many different things it can mean, and how rarely the person who receives help is asked what it cost. I paid off my remaining loan balance that same month. After the deposit, I had $4,311 left over. I put it in a savings account I named in my phone's label field for Wren. The loan payoff happened on a Tuesday afternoon in February. I transferred the final balance, $4,418, from my checking account at 4:47 p.m., sitting at my kitchen table after school. The servicer's website showed a zero balance at 4:49 p.m. I looked at it for a while. Then I closed the laptop and made dinner. I have thought a lot about what I expected to feel at that moment and what I actually felt. I expected something like relief or resolution, the particular weightlifting that people describe when a long debt ends. What I felt instead was a kind of arithmetic grief, the recognition that 5 years of $312 monthly payments had been the cost of a decision made in a savings institution in Shaker Heights while I was on campus in Kent, and that the decision had been made by people who loved me in their way and had simply not thought to ask. I have not spoken to my mother since November. My father called once, in March, and left a voicemail that was 4 minutes long and covered, in order, his love for me, the difficulty of 2018, his regret, the ways he had always tried, and the hope that I would understand someday. I listened to all 4 minutes. I did not call back. I thought about what he had said the summer before my senior year of high school at the kitchen table in August. "We have a college fund for you, Wren. It should cover most of the tuition if you go somewhere in-state." I thought about the particular certainty in his voice when he said it.
He had meant it.
I believe he meant it when he said it. Tamsin and I have texted twice. She does not know the details. I have not told her, and I do not plan to. She sent a photograph of the baby in December, in a onesie the color of old mustard, and I sent back a heart and the baby's name, which is Iris, which I think is a good name. Iris does not know any of this. Iris is a baby. None of this is Iris's fault. What I have been thinking about, in the month since February, is not the money, or not only the money. What I think about is the decision my parents made in September 2018, in a savings institution in Shaker Heights, filing a form and entering a signature that was not mine without calling me, without explaining, without asking. Tamsin needed help, and they helped her. That impulse I understand. What I cannot square is the part that came after. 6 years of saying nothing. 6 years of watching me make loan payments. 6 years of my father asking, at Christmases, how the loans were going, whether I was making progress. He asked how the loans were going. He knew. He knew at Thanksgiving 2022. He knew at every Christmas. He knew when I told him I had set up autopay and was tracking it in a spreadsheet and that I liked watching the number move. He listened to all of that and said things that were warm and encouraging and accurate about my character. Responsible, smart, you've always managed, and not once did he say, "Wren, there's something you should know about where that number started." I have been trying to find a word for what that is. It is not cruelty. I do not think he is a cruel person. It is something quieter than cruelty and more durable. It is the capacity to let a person carry a weight that you put on them and to admire their strength in carrying it, without ever mentioning that you are the one who loaded it. I think about that sometimes, the specific quality of that question, asked across a holiday table by a person who knows the answer and asks anyway. I do not have a philosophy for it. I have only the fact of it, and the specific fact of who I was when I answered, proud of my spreadsheet, proud of my progress, believing I was building something out of my own discipline and patience. I was. I also had no idea what I was actually building on. Families have a way of making you feel like the shape of your life is something you chose, when some of its most important dimensions were decided before you arrived at the table. I do not say this to be bitter. I say it because it is true, and I spent a long time not saying it because saying it felt like an accusation, and I did not want to accuse my family of anything, and so I carried the weight and called it mine. It has been 7 months since I paid off the loans. The spreadsheet is still on my laptop. I have not deleted it. Sometimes I open it and look at the column of monthly payments, 62 rows of $247 or $312 every 15th of the month from November 2020 to February 2025, and I read it the way you might read a document that describes a place you used to live. It is accurate. It happened. And it is also now finished. I still teach second grade. I still drive the same route to Lincoln Elementary, past the same gas station, and the same park with the broken swing that the city has been meaning to fix for 2 years. I have started a small after-school art program on Tuesdays for kids who want to stay and make things. 11 kids come. Last week, one of them asked me if I was going to keep doing it next year.
I said yes.
She said, "Okay, good," and went back to her collage. Before I close, I want to ask you something. If you found out that a promise made to you, a specific, named, funded promise, had been quietly redirected to someone else without your knowledge, and that you had been paying the cost of that redirection for 5 years, would you have accepted the settlement? Or would you have taken it to court and made them say what they did in front of a judge? I have been living with my answer for 7 months. I am still not certain I got it right. This channel tells stories about family, about the promises we make and the ones we quietly unmake, and about what it means to finally know what you are carrying and why. If this story found you when you needed it, we are glad.